You have heard the phrase Black Wall Street, maybe on a documentary, maybe in a song. It sounds like a slogan, a nice idea, a thing people say. But it was a real place. It had a name, a map, a main street, and a bank. And in the spring of 1921, it was burned to the ground in a single night. This is the story of Greenwood, a neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where black families built something that should not have been possible in their time. They built wealth, real wealth, the kind that buys land, opens hotels, and gets passed to your children. And then they watched it vanish in about 18 hours. To understand how it rose, you have to go back to 1906. A man named O.W. Gurley arrived in Tulsa. He was the son of formerly enslaved parents, and he had money in his pocket and a plan in his head. He bought 40 acres of land on the north side of town. Then he made one decision that changed everything. He would sell that land only to other black people. Why did that matter so much? Because this was the Jim Crow South. White-owned banks would not lend to black families. White-owned stores would not serve black customers. The law itself kept black people locked out of the wider economy. Gurley looked at that wall and decided to build a whole world on the other side of it. The land sold. Families came. They came fleeing the harsher cruelty of Mississippi and Arkansas, looking for something close to a fair chance. And on Gurley's 40 acres, a town began to grow. He built a rooming house, then a hotel, then a grocery store stocked from his own farm. He loaned money to other black entrepreneurs who could not borrow a dime anywhere else. That loan, from one black man to another, was the seed of everything that followed. Then came J.B. Stratford, another son of formerly enslaved parents. He had a law degree and a fierce belief that black people would advance fastest by pooling their money and building their own. He put up rental properties and then the Stratford Hotel, 54 rooms on Greenwood Avenue. It was said to be the largest black-owned hotel in America. It had a dining hall and hosted live jazz. In today's money, it would be worth over $1 million. Then came John and Lula Williams, who built the Dreamland Theater, 750 seats, packed on weekends. Then came Andrew Smitherman, who ran the Tulsa Star newspaper and used it to tell black readers they had rights worth defending. Lawyers came, doctors came. The district built its own hospital, its own library, its own school system that other towns admired. Here's the part that still stuns economists today. Because black dollars were locked out of white Tulsa, those dollars stayed home. A dollar earned in Greenwood was spent in Greenwood. Again and again, before it ever left, the barber paid the grocer paid the doctor paid the newspaper. Historians estimate that a single dollar circulated somewhere between 19 and dozens of times inside the community before leaving. The exact number is debated, but the meaning is not. The money stayed. And when money stays, a community gets rich. By 1921, Greenwood was 35 square blocks of black achievement. Hotels, theaters, grocery stores, churches, doctors, lawyers, 2 newspapers. People called it the Negro Wall Street. Booker T. Washington is often credited with the phrase, "It was very likely the most prosperous black community in the entire country." Now hold that picture in your mind, a whole world built by hand against every law and limit the country could throw at it. Hold on to it, because this is where the story turns. In the spring of 1921, Greenwood was the most prosperous black community in America. 35 square blocks of black-owned hotels, theaters, banks, and homes in the heart of the Jim Crow South. This is the story of how it was destroyed in a single night. On May 30th, 1921, a 19-year-old black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland stepped into an elevator in a downtown Tulsa building. The operator was a 17-year-old white girl named Sarah Page. Something happened in that elevator. To this day, no one knows exactly what. The most common account is that Rowland stumbled and grabbed her arm or stepped on her foot, and she cried out. He fled. That was all. But in 1921, Tulsa, that was enough. Rowland was arrested the next day. A local newspaper printed an inflammatory story. By evening, a white mob had gathered at the courthouse, demanding the jail hand him over. A group of black men, many of them World War I veterans, came to protect Rowland from being lynched. A shot was fired. No one knows by whom. And then the night exploded. What followed was not a riot. A riot is chaos. This was something closer to an invasion. Thousands of white men poured across the railroad tracks into Greenwood. They looted homes. They set fires block by block. Witnesses describe private planes flying overhead, dropping burning materials onto rooftops. When black families tried to call the fire department, firefighters were turned away at gunpoint by the mob. By the time the sun rose on June 1st, Greenwood was gone. 35 blocks of it, more than 1,000 homes burned, hundreds more looted, the Stratford Hotel gone, the Dreamland Theater gone, churches, the hospital, the library, the schools, the grocery stores, the law offices, all of it reduced to ash and brick. How many people died? We still do not have a certain answer, and that uncertainty is part of the crime. Early reports counted around 36. The state commission that investigated decades later estimated the true number was likely between 100 and 300. Many were buried in unmarked graves. Researchers are still searching Tulsa soil for them today. Nearly 10,000 people, almost the entire black population of Tulsa, were left homeless overnight. Many were rounded up and held in internment camps for days. And then came the second injury, the quiet one. The insurance companies refused to pay. Policy after policy was denied under riot clauses. The people who had built Greenwood with their own hands were told the law owed them nothing. No white resident was ever convicted for the destruction of Greenwood. Not one. Dick Rowland, the young man at the center of it all, was quietly released. The charges were dropped. Sarah Page reportedly declined to press the matter. The spark that burned a city had been almost nothing at all. So where did the founders go? Gurley, who had built it all from 40 acres, lost his fortune and moved to Los Angeles, and history nearly forgot him. Stratford was blamed for the violence and fled to Chicago to escape arrest, rebuilding his life as a lawyer, but never returning. Smitherman's newspaper press was destroyed, and he left for the East Coast. The titans of Black Wall Street scattered across the country, their wealth turned to smoke. And yet, here's the part people forget. Greenwood did not simply die. Many residents stayed. They came back to the ashes, and they rebuilt. Within a few years, hundreds of businesses were operating again. By the 1940s, Greenwood was thriving a second time. The will that built it the first time had not burned. What finally finished Greenwood was slower and quieter than fire. As segregation eased in the 1950s and 60s, black dollars could finally be spent anywhere, and so they flowed out of the neighborhood instead of circling within it. Then came urban renewal. In the 1970s, the city ran a highway directly through the heart of Greenwood, splitting the district and clearing much of what remained. The fire took Greenwood in a night. The highway took it in plain daylight, with permits and signatures. So why does this story matter to you now, a century later? Because Greenwood was not a fantasy. It was proof. Proof that when a community keeps its money circulating among its own, wealth compounds with stunning speed. And it is also proof of how quickly that wealth can be taken when the people who hold it are left unprotected by the law. Economists today still study the racial wealth gap and trace part of it back to nights exactly like this one, when generations of accumulated wealth were destroyed in hours and never repaid. You have heard the phrase Black Wall Street. Now you know it was not a slogan. It was a place, built by people who refused to accept the limits handed to them, burned by people who could not stand to see them succeed, and remembered by everyone who understands that what was built there could be built again.